So let me get the tape recorder started here. Let's ask our Lord to give us some direction on all this content. Father, we thank you again for the day and for your presence and your protection, your provision, all that you do. Just help us, Lord, to make good decisions as we just continue to work with our brothers and our sisters in various parts of the world who are doing your work. Pray that you just give us wisdom, Father, as we're seeking to know how to best provide equipping and resources and practice and all that we're trying to accomplish, Lord, here at BGU, to keep doing the work that you've put before each one of us. I just pray, Lord, that you'll watch over our technology today and let everything work well, and just give us some good thoughts and give us your thoughts, Lord. You said we can ask you for your wisdom, and so that's what we're doing. We're just asking you for your wisdom today, Father. And it's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, good. Good evening, Martine. Good afternoon, I think it is there.
Oh, good morning to everybody.
All right.
Sorry, I will have to skip out for about 15 minutes to take my son to his music school.
All right. Yeah, well, good. I've got the tape recorder going, so we'll be able to hear what's going on. Well, I just kind of enjoyed some of the different articles and websites, the different ones of you who have passed on. I really think that's what we're all about, trying to share resources. I've just kind of put some notes down, from especially from one article that Glenn sent to me, and then just some of the issues that Martine had sent over. But maybe I'll just kind of open the floor right now before I share any of my thoughts and my notes. Just what have you been seeing? What kind of thoughts have you been having? Have you been looking at some of the content, the material on what other schools are doing in the area of dissertations and alternative projects and the like?
Thank you, Bill. This is Gwen. I'm just going to add, I sent out something yesterday to everyone, and it was because while I was at church yesterday, one of the young women there, I was just meeting her because we're new to that congregation after moving over here, and I asked what she was doing, and she's not only working, but she is attending Seattle University program in educational administration. For those of you that are not aware, it is in Seattle. It is a Catholic university. It's one of the major universities, and it is regionally accredited and it has law schools and everything else. And I know the dean there. I had met him, and in fact, I'd sent him another note asking about alternative education dissertation styles. But what is really interesting is she mentioned that they had been practicing now for a while, and she was doing a Carnegie dissertation program, and they were using that. And so I thought, well, I'll just check out the website, and so I sent that to you all, and I hope you had a chance to look. But I did find it interesting because one of the big things is the proclamation that a practitioner doctorate is not lower or second class to a PhD, but it is different. Mm-hmm. And it has different purposes because it's preparing people for practice. And that's, so I thought that was rather interesting. And it said if we use the same approach and the same style, then we are doing a disservice for those that are practitioners. And so, as you can see in there, many of the U.S. major universities are using that. And so I just thought it would be an interesting added. Just one other thing I might add is that we have a consortium here of universities that are offering theological graduate education, and one is Canadian, one is in Seattle, and one is in Portland. I have not heard back from them yet to see their alternatives. That would include George Fox and include all of the others that are here.
Very good. Yes,
Okay, may I make a point?
certainly.
I've tried to look at as many of the samples and examples that have been sent to us. And I just highlighted what I would call questions that would relate to whatever policy we may come up with in terms of the dissertation by portfolio. My first point is that, as we agree, the professional doctorate is distinct from the PhD. However, it does not mean that the PhD does not have practical application. My second point is that the professional doctorate, the distinction is reflected in the kind and the quality of the research. That again is not a value statement on the quality of either the PhD or the professional doctorate. One of the questions I would like to ask, and I've tried to see if I did find any of those among the links that were sent to me. I am still to see a sample professional doctorate. I haven't seen that yet. What a sample portfolio that is used for either the professional doctorate or the PhD. I've just seen comments and statements of the content. What I have seen, and especially what Martine just sent to us in terms of the linkages, is that those portfolios are portfolios that are descriptive of professional portfolios that universities have asked people to submit through them, so that when they are looking for a job, the job seekers could go in and pull up those portfolios. They are not necessarily portfolios that have been submitted for review as dissertations. That is my observation. And then my final observation is, whatever decision we come up with, we would have to include a statement on what support will our school provide to people who would be doing a portfolio style dissertation. So those are some of my major comments.
Okay. Thanks, Claire. Others like to jump in.
I was also interested, Gwen, in the dissertation in practice. I have the DIP.
Right.
That was a category I wasn't aware even existed. And I wonder if the typical DMin, at least in most seminaries that I know, isn't a whole lot less of a dissertation than an evaluation of a program, usually the one that they're working on or working in, with recommendations for changes based on the research that they've done concerning some problem in that particular institution or program. Is that would that be a fair statement from the experience you all have had with DMins, like from Fuller or from a regular seminary?
Mary, can you say anything? I know you're at the tire store.
Yeah, it's just so loud here. Can I type my answers It's so loud right here.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Can you repeat the question again? I'm outside. I just came outside.
Yeah, if the dissertation in practice to me sounds an awful lot like the typical DMin final project, which in my experience has always been a whole lot less of a academic and much more of an evaluative sort of a treatise of a problem in an organization, usually the one that they're belonging to, and then research about how to solve that problem, and then recommendations for, or even what they put into practice to solve that problem. And is that typical of DMINs that you know of? Or has DMIN developed into something more academic over the past couple of years?
I think that is the case at Fuller, but I'm not very familiar with the DMIN. I'm more familiar with the DMIS, since I'm in the School of Intercultural Studies, and the DMIN falls under the School of Theology.
And how is the DMIS there? What is it like?
So the DMIS, I mean, it's not quite as academic as the PhD, but it is much more rigorous than the DMIN as far as the process. But it's also geared towards, like, I'm just thinking of somebody who I teach with who just completed her dissertation, and she was looking at very much typical what we do in our dissertation, but it was just more rigorous in the process for the research and data collection. But other than that, there were a lot of similarities, but I just think that it's more rigorous in the data collection and analysis, but similar style. Does that help?
Yeah, I was wondering if given the fact that the BGU has a DMIN and a DTL that I think is of a higher, at least the final project, the dissertation is of a higher level than a lot of institutions who give a DMIN. Introducing the portfolio into that might be seen as a step backwards toward something less valuable, or less not valuable. I don't like to use the word valuable. If it's less academic, some people look at that as less. The doctorate is of a lesser quality. I hate that. I don't want to say it that way, but that's the way people look at it. And we don't want to take our program and move it backwards in any sense.
But I think also, just to jump in there, I've just been having this conversation. You know, I think part of it's just academia too, the way that they look down. Like, we have a whole pecking order at Fuller. So if you get the PhD, obviously, like, you're full part of academia. DMIS, you're kind of cutting it. DMIN, not so much, even though we have a DMIN program. So I think part of the issues are what's inherent in academia too, and the way that they look at degree programs, which has been really frustrating. That's just been some recent conversations that we've been having about how can we change academia and the way that they see practical, degrees as opposed to the PhDs. But sorry, didn't mean to jump in there, but I just wanted to share that.
Right. Well, it has a lot to do with, especially with our international students, what kind of, in Spanish is categoría, well, what kind of standing they get from their peers, because we might say that it's too bad it looks like it's less or more, but we want to give our international people the best standing possible for the degree that they're getting and the money that they're paying for. So I would be careful that a portfolio PhD system wouldn't be done in a way that would be looked down upon by their peers as they try to enter the whatever world they're living in out there. The whole problem with the term doctor, the title doctor for DMin, DTL, PhD, EDD, the fact there's only one title already presents a problem, and then to sort of proliferate the problem by saying, well, we have a kind of a doctorate with a portfolio presentation that to someone else, when they saw it, might look like it wasn't really an academic doctorate. I'm not sure how to get around it, but because I do believe in I do believe in doing something in a portfolio fashion, but it's got to be done in a way that looks just as thorough, and perhaps more so. What I'm seeing is that it looks to me like, and I talked to a friend yesterday, he said, what you're trying to do is going to require more work for the portfolio people than for the other people. And I think he's right. I think if they want to go that route, it's going to be more work rather than less, but of course have the value of being extremely practical and presentable in a different fashion.
If I may be allowed to follow on what Les has just observed, one approach I thought about, especially as I looked at the different literature, is to ask the question, what skill sets are we requiring of individuals, whether they do the portfolio dissertation or the traditional dissertation? And it seems to me from the literature that the goal should be that we require the same skill sets. The difference may be how we get there in terms of the acquisition of the skill set. But I would suggest that we start from that perspective. What are the skill sets that we would like the professional doctorates to leave the program with? What are the skill sets that we would like the PhD students to leave the students with? And I would strongly recommend, especially for our international students, that one of these skill sets, and I speak for the PhD, but I would suggest the same for the professional doctorates, that one of these skill sets should be the ability to do research, so that when they are leaders in their different fields, they are able to understand research, even if they farm that responsibility out to others, whether they be consultants or consortiums. Because the worst thing that could happen to you is that as a leader, you're required to do research for your organization, but you don't have enough of the skill set to even be able to evaluate the research that others may do on your organization and bring to you. And that could be a loser.
I'd like to share my screen here. I'm just trying to see if I can make it big enough so we can all see it. Hold on a second.
While you're doing that, I might comment on what Claire said, because I fully agree with you, Claire. And I must say, research is something I thought every university student should be well prepped in. And so my argument is never against research as we look at this, because I thought that was just one of those skills that every learned person needed. So that I appreciate that remark, but I fully agree.
I think for the portfolio presentation, some presentation skill sets might be required that the typical dissertation candidate wouldn't have. Because in the presentation of the portfolio, there are skill sets there that you don't usually encounter, such as the putting together PowerPoints and doing graphs and charts for a presentation. So I think that's why I suggested that perhaps the portfolio approach might actually require the person be of a higher caliber, but we would require skills that wouldn't be required of the other, unless we really care that the other be able to present their materials well also, which being new, I'm not sure if that's part of the package.
Very good.
I
Go ahead.
agree with that. Oh, because I think that, especially if students are wanting to go more the academic route, like maybe they want to teach, I feel like the portfolio would require more of them, especially if it's about like getting published.
Mhm.
I feel academically, I feel like the portfolio would be more rigorous. So I actually echo those comments as well.
And I agree with what Lester said. I think it would be more work and more difficult.
I agree with that as well. I think research needs to be a skill in itself in order to acquire a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
Just to maybe help focus our conversation a bit, I had taken just some excerpts from the article that Gwen had passed on. Can you guys all see my screen? I'm not sure if it's going to be big enough, but I thought that this article summarized fairly well some of the distinguishing marks of a professional degree program. I think, as Claire said, PhD programs are now are becoming more practical, and the PhD program that we're trying to put together is going to have a practical application component because it's a BGU degree. As I was looking at this article, well, let's just look at a few of these items. I highlighted, and of course, this is from the Carnegie Project, which, this is from 2015, and Gwen mentioned, somebody she had met at church that had been involved in a project related to the Carnegie Project. And of course, this whole consortium was really focusing on what are, especially they were functioning, of course, in the ED, in the education doctorate, but there are just so many similarities I see between what we're doing, say in a DTL or a DMin, say compared to an ED, which is another professional degree. And of course, Gwen can speak, and others of you can speak from the ED perspective. But anyway, these were some of the key points that came out of these consortiums, these meetings, that really distinguish the professional doctorate. It's framed around questions of equity, ethics, and social justice to bring solutions to complex problems in practice. Prepares leaders who can construct and apply knowledge to make a positive difference in the lives of individuals, families, organizations, and communities. It demonstrates collaboration and communication skills. Hopefully, as we're looking through these, they may sound a little familiar because they sound very much like what we've been trying to accomplish, right?
Right.
Provides field-based opportunities to analyze problems of practice, to use multiple frames to develop meaningful solutions. Is grounded in and develops a professional knowledge base that integrates both practical and research knowledge, that links theory with systematic inquiry, and then emphasizes the generation, the transformation, and the use of professional knowledge in practice. As I read those, I guess it struck me that that's the heart of our transformational focus at BGU. Is integrating, we'll say, practical knowledge with theory and practice, as we use those terms. That's been the heart of our doctoral programs, I think, at least since I've been associated with the school since its inception in 1990. That's been the focus, even before we became a BGU, even when we were the Northwest Graduate School of Ministry. We were trying to take theory and apply it to practical problems. So the professional degree programs that we've been working with have always focused on problem solving, right? Which is what we do in the professional world, whether we're working in the area of education or church ministry or whatever the profession might be. This group also, they went through several various revisions I think what they did finally, they tried to use the word demonstrate and put that in front of each one of these. And so they had action verbs, but, you know, to demonstrate understanding of possible solutions and problem practice, to demonstrate scholarly practitioners' ability to act ethically and with integrity, to demonstrate the scholarly practitioner's ability to communicate effectively, integrate both theory and practice to advance practical knowledge, provide evidence of potential for impact on practice, policy, and future research, use methods of inquiry that are appropriate to the problem of practice, identify the rationale for the method of inquiry that is appropriate to this dissertation practice. Again, as I keep reading these kinds of comments, it still strikes me that these kinds of characteristics are already at the heart of what we're trying to do at BGU.
Mhm.
I think the fact that we've had this transformational strategy as a required component for any dissertation that comes out of BGU has actually made, I think, BGU very unique over its time of existence. Others, of course, now are starting to bring that in, but I think we were one of the first that were actually providing that kind of a practical strategy that was required to be a part of any dissertation. So, you know, when we have a problem that we're working with, we are doing, and now we do research into that problem with the objective of coming up with a practical intervention strategy that will begin to address the problem. Not that we'll necessarily solve the problem all at once, but it will begin to address the problem. You know, we've for many years have had the consultation, city consultation approach, which, you know, again, Ray Bakke started with that approach. He and John Sharp did some writing in that whole area. A lot of our students have used city consultations in various parts of the world, which involves bringing together the leaders within a city. The educational leaders, the civic leaders, the church leaders, other types of leaders that have some kind of influence in a particular community, bringing those leaders together to begin to think as a think tank, to begin to address issues within that community from a very practical point of view. Again, taking disciplines of knowledge and applying them to community issues, a city consultation. And of course, Brad has kind of written up the whole city consultation as one of the major possible approaches to a dissertation project for a DTL, especially those that have a track that's focused on community or organizational transformation. But just as you look at that, those of you maybe who are looking at the BGU program, what do you think? Do you think some of those components have been a part of our program as you just think through some of those practical points that had been coming out of the Carnegie Consortium? If you're talking, Glenn, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for this, because that's what impressed me about this. It really struck home in terms of our emphasis on transformation and requiring a transformational project. I felt like these were the things we were looking for currently, and I feel that is good. So I appreciate you bringing that up, but I want to listen to others because they may have seen something different.
Yeah, go ahead. Others just feel to jump in.
No, I agree with you, Bill. When I read it this morning, I thought, oh, that's just BGU. They just should have consulted with BGU, and they would have had an easier time writing these all up. So yeah, it looked to me very, very, very similar to what I've been able to discern so far.
I think, of course, Claire and I have been working on the research methodology course with each other for the last few terms. And I think what we're really working on for BGU, and I think Mary mentioned it, the idea of strengthening the data gathering components within a dissertation approach. You know, we've always had that component there, but I'm not sure we were maybe quite as disciplined in terms of applying research methodologies. And I think, at least I've heard from a few of you, as Claire mentioned, you know, let's look at what kind of skill sets we're trying to help students with to develop in their lives, so as they are in their professional parts of the world, they have the skills they need to solve problems, okay? And the research skill is a part of that skill set. It's not the only skill set, but to be able to look at a situation, let's say a community, and to know how to begin to get the information that a person needs to begin to solve a problem is a skill set. It's sometimes we can be in situations, and of course I was in professional ministry for 25 years, along with, you know, other school situations. But there were times that we could look at our communities and not really know how to get at the information that we needed to begin to make a difference. So I think, you know, that's at least one of the skill sets that we would be applying. What is research?
I don't know how much in the Research Bridge course you focus, because I know you cram a lot in there, Bill, but as far as like how to design, you know, survey questionnaires without impacting the outcome, just like the critical thinking skills of how do we remove some of our bias and some of our influence over the data. And I don't know, maybe that means we need another course, but the students that I've had, it feels like it's the research, the rigor of the research process is where I feel like there's a lot of the challenges that I face as a supervisor. And again, I don't want to put this all on you, Bill. You have to cover everything in this course. But, you know, maybe that means we have another course that they take or another step before they get to the dissertation process, because I think that would also add to the academic rigor of whatever choice that they decide on for their dissertation. But that would be my 2 cents in that. So I would echo that.
Right, and you've hit on a key issue that we are again dealing with right now. You know, one of the textbooks we're using right now is called Qualitative Research by Miriam, and she devotes at least 3 chapters in her book on survey and interview question development. And, you know, and again, I think, as you said, we have not focused on those kinds of skill sets in the past. We've left students to kind of develop their surveys, their interview questions, etc. And we get what we've gotten, right? Sometimes we have good objective questions. Other times we get questions that really needed a lot more in-depth thinking. One of the problems we have now, you know, we have a 9-week course called Research Methodology. I think in the DMin it was called the Research Bridge course. But basically, that just getting through the proposal process in 9 weeks is a bit of a stretch. Just helping people really focus their problems, their purpose. Now we really are focusing on what are research questions, learning how to develop research questions, learning how to develop a theoretical framework, even knowing what a theoretical framework is. What is that theory? What does it mean to be able to take theory and begin to apply it in practice? Developing a literature review that really focuses on some of the components of a theoretical framework, becoming familiar with the thinking, you know, in the area, and then even, you know, trying to design at least the basic framework for a research methodology. Getting through that kind of a content in 9 weeks is a bit of a stretch. And I think Claire and I both have agreed that, you know, we need a second term. And I guess we have a second term. We call it DFP 701, or if it's a DMin, it's DIS 701, I think. We have a second course now, but it's not really a developed course. It's basically just a Populi online course where students can upload the different chapters of their, their dissertations so that supervisors can see those, etc. So we've not really, I think, done what we need to do in terms of developing that second course. But logically, it would seem to me in that second dissertation writing course is where we should focus on some of the skills involved in developing good interview questions, good survey questions. We now have a section in the proposal on basic assumptions. What assumptions does a student come to the dissertation process with? Be those biases, pre-drawn conclusions, but having a student at least to have some self-awareness of what his or her biases are, predetermined assumptions, and how those affect the dissertation process, how they affect even the way they put together questions. So a lot of that, I think, needs to go into a second term course, which again, we've got the infrastructure there, but I think we need to now develop that second term course.
I was wondering whether or not it hasn't been the job of the dissertation supervisor to, if the person obviously didn't have the skills necessary to do a good survey, to basically guide them through enough learning so as to correct that lacking. Is that been part of the dissertation supervisor's job up till now?
I would say that is the case, but I would dare say that most of our supervisors don't have that level of expertise either to help a student develop, the kind of questions, for example, that are very helpful in getting at the data that they want to get at, say within a survey or an interview.
Yeah.
Also, I was going to jump in and say, Bill, I teach research for another school, and I'm at the master's level teaching for a thesis. I spend 16 weeks just on the research methodologies. So nothing to do with them even getting to the point of, so I think we may want to look at either increasing or adding something, because I think to put that onto the dissertation supervisor, I spend a lot of time already, and I do a lot of teaching of, how to design the questions, but I think sometimes the pushback is, oh, well, I've already taken this. Yes, you've already taken this course, but you're still not understanding how to design a question that doesn't basically elicit an answer that you want, or that's so unclear, it's so general, you're not going to get data that's going to be very helpful.
Exactly.
So we will do one of two things, either beef up the experience for the supervisors or add something else for the students, either more assignments or something ahead of time before they get to the dissertation process. Because for me, that's been a recurring issue that I've seen, is just basic understanding of how to design good questions that connect with all the methodologies they're using.
Right.
Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
That's good. Yeah, it might be appropriate, Claire, for you to jump in and just kind of share some thoughts that have been helpful to me, I think, in terms of when we're helping students not to have pre-drawn conclusions about anything when they go into the research process. Make sure you unmute. There you go.
I agree with Mary's observation, because I have taught master's level students in terms of the research skills, and we did much more work during the period, a 15-week period or a 6-week period where the class met 3 times a week than we currently do in the research class now. However, what I do notice about our students as they come into the research class is many of them come into it, and that is normal, with solutions rather than questions. And it takes a while to get them to put aside their preconceived solutions and to start asking questions that are sharp enough and focused enough to be research kinds of questions. And that skill set does take some time to develop. So that's one piece. And the other piece is, and that is normal, the students are more married to context than to concepts. Now, the context of the research is always important. However, the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework is even more important because theories are globally applicable. And again, getting students towards that mindset does take some time. So I do think that we probably need to have a second research class as to how we do it, etc. I know that that is an administrative responsibility. It means that we will have to take away something, but in fairness to both the students and the supervisors, we probably need to think of a second research class.
May I interact a little
Yes.
bit more practically? I fully support what you have been sharing so far, and I apologize again for my absence. But, I thank you for all your work on this behalf on this subject. I fully support the need for conceptual frameworks. I have one comment question and then one suggestion. We as Westerners, and since the Greco-Roman philosophers, are thinking in terms of conceptual frameworks and applications. Some other cultures are not necessarily thinking within this these parameters. The root dilemma that we have, I believe, is how do we put all this together? We need to have a doctoral process that follows practice that's usually dominated, if I may use this term, by Northern Western cultures. However, most of our students are not coming from those cultures. So this is quite a challenge for them. And although they have been taking classes from us, it might be quite a challenge for them just to move into that mindset. Some of them are already working with Western organizations, and it's probably a bit easier. But I think this is one of our main underlying challenges as far as the dissertation process. And it will probably take a little bit more, even further reflection as to how to integrate all of this. And this is to be discussed, but I like what I've seen and heard so far. Another way that I would like to suggest that we consider instead of adding a class is to, and I've seen it happen in Eastern Europe, and is to we are implementing this in Western Africa, is to develop possibly a monthly doctoral seminar that is going to be online, that is going to be focused on one aspect of research methodologies. And this would be part of the dissertation writing classes instead of adding another dissertation methods class. But this would allow any student who is participating to the dissertation writing process to take 1 hour of 90-minute webinar on different specific research methods perspectives. They would not be charged for that. That would be part of our DFP classes. And and we would build our research methods knowledge base, since these video webinars would be recorded and would be made available, could be made available in one folder on the Google Drive for students later on as well.
Mhm.
That's another suggestion. Also, getting students just to talk to each other or to share their challenges in writing dissertations on a regular basis, because they feel very much alone with the dissertation supervisor. But developing some kind of a writing community in dissertations would probably help some of our students who are much more community oriented than we are. For instance, I'm a self-writer, self-motivated. I don't care if there's community or not. If I have to write, I write. But many of our students are much more efficient in community. And it would probably benefit to them if they would be accountable for their progress in dissertation writing within a dissertation writing community group. So these are just a couple of thoughts.
I really like those suggestions, Martine. On that third point, in terms of the student sharing in community, I'm wondering if that, that Populi course we have right now, it's, the second course, which is the writing course that Judy or now Bridget would enter students into. Would that fulfill that kind of community, or are you thinking more face-to-face kinds of communities within different locales of our student population?
Well, I'm thinking just on Zoom meetings and make them available to all of our dissertation writing students, even those who are past the dissertation writing process and still on it.
Okay.
Right, you might be able to get some peer mentoring from people that have already done dissertations. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, that would be wonderful too.
Martine, I noticed in a dissertation I read last week of an Ethiopian, one of the Ethiopian students, and as I talked to him, I could see he struggled to think in terms of our dissertation outline and format. He followed the rules. He had all the sections, but that wasn't how he talked. It wasn't how he expressed what he had done. And so I think you're right, Martine. We need to figure out how to be a little more flexible for cultures that basically aren't very Western, and people who haven't had much contact with Western education as they come into the program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I know Lowell Bakke, he used to hammer on this point quite often in our academic cabinet meetings, on this very point that we, in our dissertation process, for example, we are basically forcing people into a particular mold, a conceptual writing mode. Mm-hmm. Whereas some cultures that are more working in an oral tradition, that is going to be more difficult to put those concepts, even to put them into conceptual format in a written form. Mm-hmm. And since I'm mine is a Western perspective, it's difficult for me to even begin to identify, but I need to be able to identify that. We need others who can give us input, help us understand what that would even look like in terms of a capstone final project kind of.
And my challenge is that most of the non-Western accrediting agencies that I am aware of have all followed the Western model of reading and writing.
Right.
And if we do something that's very different or very contextualized or culture sensitive, then we are going to go against what is commonly acceptable.
Right.
So there's a big challenge, but maybe we can think out of the box and be innovative and take the lead on that. And I wonder also if Andrew Sears' group could help us a little bit. I can ask the question to his chair and discussion.
Can I add 2 things to that?
Go ahead, Mary.
sorry. I think also part of the challenge is, in general, people, and I'm not sure if this is Western or if this is global, but I think people tend to be more reflective in their writing and speaking style. It's more narrative, which does not always translate into academic writing. And I think that's part of our challenge we have to realize, especially people that not only it's their training, but they're just more naturally inclined that way. And I think that, I mean, I've seen people go through, undergrads and masters and never learn how to write any other way but reflective. So I think that's one of our issues. The second issue is critical thinking skills. I just don't think in general we teach critical thinking skills, whether it's Western, Eastern, or anything else. I don't know if that's something that's inherent in culture and communities. And so I'm wondering, how do we, rather than just kind of assuming or expecting people have critical thinking skills and saying, well, it's expected that you have these, how can we build that in somewhere into the whole process in a very tangible, spelled out way? Because those are the two things that kind of come up repeatedly for me, is more this reflective thinking and writing, and then the lack of critical thinking skills. My 2 cents.
May I add to that, that I appreciate Baki's commitment to being culturally relevant to the very many cultures that we serve. However, I think one of our challenges is that the reality is, whether or not we like it or agree with it, the Western cultural mindset is the dominant one. And those who are from the non-Western part of the world, you have to live in two cultures. And especially when it comes to working with and seeking to get recognition and seeking to make a contribution within the Western world, you have to be able to traverse your two cultures to even to get attention. So that is an ongoing tension that we have to live with, but it speaks to our specific challenge on how we want to be able to traverse the two and not rob the non-Western world from the ability to get the skills that they need to navigate within the Western context. And having come out from the non-Western context that taught me to do some of the things that the Western context do, I understand that, and I understand some people's commentary that perhaps schools like ours are forcing people to stay within a system that is not necessarily beneficial to them. I know that piece too. So I am very aware of the challenges that we work with.
I think that the real responsibility of Baki is to do almost the opposite. We need to teach the Western people to think in other ways other than Western. I'm reading a book called The Geography of Thought that says that most of the cultures of the world, when they get educated, know how to think Western as well as think the way they do. But the Western people, they don't know how to think any other way. And so the course that I'm going to be teaching in April, that's one of my main, hopefully one of my main goals is with the Westerners there, to give them a real idea of how other cultures think differently, and to challenge them to be able to communicate with people who are non-Western when they deal in the global community, rather than expecting everybody to be thinking in the Western way.
Very good, Lester. Thank you for mentioning that. That is an excellent point, because if we truly are, as we say, global and integrated, then all parts have to be there. So we have to be Eastern as well as Western. I remember, it must have been almost 10 years ago, I was with a professor from Moscow, from the university there, and he was saying, You have to be careful because he said we look like you and we don't look so different, but he said we think very different.
Okay, I feel like we've got we've got so many different parts of this process that we're needing to think through. I think this committee starting with the idea of what would alternative dissertation approaches look like. And yet we can see there are so many other components of this process that we possibly need to think through. And we're talking about, the cultural aspects. We're talking about, critical thinking. We're talking about skill sets. Here in this piece that I had brought onto the screen, O'Mullen had identified 6 outputs currently used by universities that this person had seen. The thesis or dissertation alone, the portfolio in terms of professional practice. I left off the reflection at this moment. A published scholarly works recognized as significant and original contributions to knowledge. Portfolio in the sense of a performance or in music, visual arts, drama, and then some are using an internship with a mentoring process as a capstone process for a particular degree program. I think at least in the thinking at BGU always was in terms of some of the alternative projects. And we've allowed this other one, music, visual arts, performance. We haven't had that many people really move into that kind of a direction. But the idea there was to allow other kinds of expression of thought, creative expression that isn't necessarily in just a written conceptual format. That was part of the thinking of even allowing those other kinds of expressions to communicate a truth, an idea, a concept.
So,
I
Bill, sorry to interrupt. Just to give an example of what you're saying right now is with Patrick Sean. I'm allowing him to write the 3 first chapters of his dissertation, and the rest he's going to do by video and PowerPoints or whatever he wants to do, but verbally. And this is exactly what you are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, I'll be great to see that piece. And to be able to take a few of those kinds of projects and make them available somehow so other students can maybe have some of their creativity inspired, I think would really be excellent. One of the issues that sparked, I think, that was a catalyst for this particular community was people submitting in their proposals to the academic cabinet in the form of a book. And I think some of us felt like some of the book ideas were not really fulfilling what we considered a dissertation substitute. One person thought about writing an autobiography. And again, because this gets back to, I think, what you mentioned earlier, Claire, what are the skill sets that we feel are important for a person who is getting he or she was getting a doctoral degree? Writing an autobiography, we do not feel actually would, be productive in terms of learning some of the skill sets needed. I'm right now a little bit of the opinion that possibly just the writing of a book is really not, that is just too broad to even put that down as an alternative process. I think we've had some really great books published that have followed after a dissertation project, but the book itself did not fulfill the project. Now, there could be exceptions, I think. If we saw a book fulfilling the skill sets, and of course, there again, we need to think about the skill sets. Some of them are listed here. Integrating professional knowledge and practice, communicating effectively, problem solving. I suppose if a book really could demonstrate those skills, then we could possibly allow it. But I think we have to really be much more detailed in terms of what that book would look like, not just write a book of 60,000 words, minimum, that would fulfill the criteria. And unfortunately, that's what we've had in our handbook for at least the years I've been associated with the school. So again, a portfolio approach. I was looking down. I just put down what I could consider maybe some application. Our required focus on the inclusion of a transformational strategy seems to fulfill the dissertation and practice criteria that has been at least discussed in this particular article. Possibly use two main categories is what I'm saying, and now I think I'd probably add a few more. But anyway, we have two criteria that are unique in our particular, at least BGU. It's the inclusion of a transformational strategy or strategies, and then we want the reflective component that we are reflective on biblical theological principles. As we've put together some of our outcomes and trying to adjust our outcomes, and we've put these down for accreditation, the spiritual dimensions are included in at least 2 or 3 of our outcomes. And therefore, somebody asked me even this week, said, do we actually have to include some kind of biblical reflection in our dissertation process? They had never seen that anywhere. I wasn't quite sure how they missed it, but to me, that is those two pieces, the transformation and reflection from a biblical perspective, are 2 key components that must be a part of the BGU final project. How that then shapes up, we could then add the research component needs to be a part of that, and some kind of problem solving. I'm just kind of looking at some skill sets that we're looking at, but I think we could add a portfolio approach, but we're going to have to really define what that means. To just bring together, as I looked at a few pieces, one woman, she was getting a degree in environmental design. I think she's over at the University of Auburn in Alabama. Her project, her portfolio was, she had put together 5 different projects where she had designed spaces within certain outdoor areas. And she went through, what was her philosophy of design, what was her design approach, what was her research through observation and interviews with people that were using those spaces. She went through the project steps, and she gave the project results. Okay, she did that for 5 different projects, and that became the portfolio. So I think, she had some of the major pieces, I think, that we could even consider as part of a traditional dissertation approach, but she applied that to 5 mini projects that she was doing within in a particular organization. I'm still not totally sure what that would look like in terms of our BGU. I think, again, if we list our skill sets, maybe that's the beginning point. List the skill sets that we feel this dissertation, this final project, whatever we want to call, is developing. Then we can use, that set of criteria to then determine the validity of a particular final project approach. Responses, reactions.
I think that would be a good measuring stick. And I believe you said you took what was here that we're viewing on the screen out of the article, the website I sent you, correct? No.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. Right. I just like to take an article and highlight parts of it they're very meaningful to whatever I'm working on. And so that's my notes, basically.
That's very good. Thank you.
I'm feeling a little pressure because I'm feeling the pressure of getting a final project handbook completed over the next month. Where I'm at now is wondering what I need to have some direction in terms of what to include in that handbook under the alternative format section.
Bill, what if within, well, by the end of Monday next week, we just email you a suggestion?
That'd be fine. Yeah.
Each of us, and independently, and without copying anybody else, so that we can just be independent thinkers. And then we meet again on Monday next week and put it all, see what we are all think, and see how we can integrate it all.
That would certainly be fine with me if others of you can handle that kind of a schedule. I think, at least for me, what I would like to see, let's just give some guidance and the kind of input I would feel like I need. Yeah. What do you consider are the skill sets that we feel are important for the doctoral program? For the doctoral
non-negotiable.
Right.
Or non-negotiable.
The non-negotiable skill sets. Yeah. And those kinds of skill sets that we would want to see demonstrated within a final project. Yeah. Okay. And then number two, possibly just write down what you consider, what we could consider valid final project formats. You know, this person is getting down, you know, a dissertation, a portfolio of professional practices, performance, music, visual arts, internship. I think those are the two things I'd like to see. Skill sets, and what do you consider are valid options for our final projects. If you think of some other comments you'd like to give me, that would be great. But I really appreciate your summaries.
Bill, are we calling into question the already accepted formats that you just mentioned?
I think we could do that if you'd like to write comments. Like I say, I'm just saying verbally, I'm questioning the book format right now because it's too vague. And I would rather see a book flow out of some other process. But that's just my personal feeling. You may have your own thoughts on that issue.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments before we close down the session?
I want to thank you, Bill, for leading this reflection. This is great, great step forward.
All right, good. Let's then put on our schedules next Monday, same time. I'll do a Zoom room. Give me your emails before that time, and then I'll try to come up with a summary document that we can look at. And out of that, I can come up with your help, some definite components that we'll add to our final project handbook, or components we may subtract. So let's say a book or whatever is there. And if you've not looked at the final project handbook, maybe I'll go ahead and just send that out to you, just so you've got it, so you can see what it looks like right now in its current form. Okay. All right. This has been recorded. I will go ahead and send you the link once I have that. I'll do that along with the minutes. I'll give you a copy of the handbook, and I'll just reemphasize in writing at least the two issues I'd like you to be writing on to me over the next few days before our meeting next Monday. All right. Well, good. I appreciate your efforts, your time. I think we're making some headway. We're discussing issues, I think, that need to be discussed, and hopefully we can come to some kind of conclusions. Not all the conclusions. I'm not sure we're going to solve the cultural issue right now, but I think that's going to be an issue. We need to bring other people into that conversation from other cultures. For those of us who have a Western perception, that's our filter. And I need to hear other filters in order to even begin to think in different terms. All right. Thank you. I'm going to close
down. Thank you, Bill.
I
appreciate your work.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.